Hello, we'll come here in Genesis chapter 38 and we're going to look at the sin of Judah. We're going to see here, we begin here in Genesis chapter 38, verse 1. And it says, "And it came to pass at the time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned in to a certain Abdullamite, whose name was Hira." Now, here it says that Judah went down to the Canaanite country. And notice he says went down. The word went down here meaning that he goes down south. Notice also should be taken here that it says he went down from his brethren, meaning he's leaving the God's covenant, leaving his brother out of God's presence and protection here. And then here he says that he turned in a certain Abdullamite named Hira. And now he's intermingling with this man called Abdullamite and intermingling with the ungodly. In the beginning of Genesis, God's whole intent is to separate the godly line, the godless line from the godly line. And he's never changed since then. But here, this is when God's covenant nation now intermingles with the sons of men. And he says, as a matter of fact, there is nothing righteous about Judah, the individual. And you're going to see this man is a very crooked man. But here he's in God's covenant position. And through Judah is the line of Christ. Christ came and Jesus Christ will come. He came back through the line of Judah. He's the line of tribe of Judah. And this is where this tribe that this man is leading, and Christ is going to come here through this line. And it says in verse 2, it says, "And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her." Again, the word went in unto her means he had sexual encounter with her. And he met this Canaanite woman, and he says that the daughter of the woman is named Shua. Again, the word here is saw. You see, he saw her. And whenever the word saw is, usually, like I mentioned before, it speaks about somebody going out of the covenant of God to a place where God does not call him or her, and then they always have to see something. They saw, or somebody sees them. You see, now here he goes out here and he saw this woman. He says he saw her, and then he says he saw the woman, and then he took her in and went into her. Now these are, first of all, we understand that these are sons of Jacob, and these are bad sons of Jacob. All sons of Jacob lack virtue. Most of them, except for Jacob, no, excuse me, except for Joseph and Benjamin. And Benjamin, these are Rachel's sons, but mostly the entire sons of Jacob were bad children. And here, but he's going into this place where sexual immorality is rampant. And for the Canaanites, sex is, sexual immorality is part of the culture there. And you remember when Dinah, when she went down to the country, she was defiled. Immediately she went down outside the country and she was defiled. And she was defiled by Shechem. But here it comes a man, immediately, and immediately he went down to this south country. He meets this prostitute. You see, he makes quick encounter with a prostitute. And again, the Canaanites, sex was a culture, and immorality was their culture like any other. Unlike, it's almost like the United States today. But this is what this country is. Back then, culture of Canaanites was like more sex driven. So, And then it says right here, this man finds this woman named Shua, a Canaanite. Again, God is against Canaanites because they are ungodly. God is trying to separate them from Canaanites. Abraham gave specifically instruction to Eliezer, when Eliezer was going to pick Isaac a wife from the far country. He said, "Do not bring me a Canaanite." But here you see, he's the sons of the great grandson of Abraham, Judah, is now intermingling with this Canaanite. And it says here in verse 3, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name Again, means watchful. In strong concordance, it means watchful. Again, in Brown driver breaks, it also means the same thing, like awake. Is watchful, awake. That's the name, or watchful or awake. And then it says in verse 4, and she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. Again, she bare a son, again, call it Onan. And Onan, the word Onan means strong. And verse 5, it says, and she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Shezeb when she bare him. Again, the son, again, here was Shelah. And then Shelah means request, means petition, to petition something. And then he was born in him when Judah was in Shezeb. That's when this child was born. And Shezem is a place in a Palestinian country, and meaning the word Shezem means strong or falsified. So, it means falsified or false. What a name it was, just like false. And in summary, these were three sons of Judah. You have you have Onan, and then you have Shelah, who was born when Judah was at Shezem. The word again, Shezem, means a falsified place. And it says in verse 6, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Now, Judah took a wife for and after has grown, so he probably have stayed there down in the Canaanite country for far too long, and up to the point that his sons grew from there and became adult. And it says that was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and they didn't really go into detail what happened, but again, it says that the Lord slew him. And verse 8, it says, and Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother. Again, you see, Judah here told Onan, he said, go into your brother's wife and marry her, and then raise up a seed, raise up your brother's son. And then he says here, and Onan knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. Now Onan did not want to produce a child for his brother, and he doesn't want to produce a child for his brother here, but again, except for his own sexual gratification. Now, whenever he went in on her, he will spill it to the ground, so he won't give up, he won't give a seed to his brother. Now, this thing is evil in the sight of God, because it means more than just sexual encounter itself. It means that his son will not will not have a seed, will not have a seed in the line of the Israelites. In other words, most of the time, a seed is given to keep to retain property and to retain land, and most importantly, to retain lineage, to have a line, a lineage in Israel. Now, if you look at Deuteronomy verse 25, verse 6, and he says here is in Deuteronomy 25, verse 6, it says, "And it shall be that the firstborn which shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel." See, when a person dies and it does not produce seed, or does not have children but leaves a wife, especially the younger brother or the relative, a brother next to him will produce again, uh, will produce seed by going in on her late brother's wife. And this was to retain the name, and the name of the late brother will not be put out. And this is what in Moses' law will rather be established. But here God is angry with this thing, because God is, because this man is not wanting to start a line for his brother, and he doesn't want to produce seed that will keep his brother's name. And this was a wicked thing. So it says in verse 10, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. You see, you say what he did. You see, he displeased God, and God slew him. See, God slew him, and he says again, the Lord slain Onan. It falls in the context of Israel and the firstborn. See, because according to Brown Driver Breaks, again, definition, Onan is the second son of Judah, and he was slain by God for not fulfilling the Levitical requirement to beget a child, you see, with the wife of his dead childless brother, according to Brown Driver Breaks. Again, this is also illustrates here the character of God, and it points vividly that God is displeased by evildoers. God is wrathful against evildoers, and whatever displeases the Lord, is bound for the Lord to act on it, and especially as it relates to the covenant nation of the people. In verse 11 it says, "Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, Lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house." Again, Judah said to Tamar, he says, remain in your father's house, and until Shelah, my third son, will be of age. And this young man, he's not grown at this point. Again, he says, lest like he die like his brother, and if he marries her. So again, and then he said Tamar went to her father's house. And also in the law of Moses, a woman is not to leave her father's house until she is married. But also here, if a woman is either widowed or divorced, she goes and stays to her father's house, until she remarries, and that's the covering and protection of women. And also, if a woman is married into a family, it's not to marry outside the family. She's to continue marrying within the family until there's no man left in that family, that is married. So here he says, if the husband, for example, if the husband dies, she is to marry his brother. And if the brother does not have any wife or son or anything, but if she's to retain, this is all to retain the land for generations. Again, we're going to talk more about it in the book of Leviticus. But here, one of the book of Leviticus says concerning that, it says in Leviticus 22, verse 13, it says, "But if the priest's daughter be a widow or divorced, and had no child, and is returned unto her father's house, as in her youth." You see, when a woman is divorced and widowed, she is to return as in her youth to her father's house. So moving on here, we come here in verse 12. It says, "And in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers in Timnah. He and his friend Hira the Adullamite." Now it says here in the process of time means after a while. When they say the word process of time, means that time has elapsed, years have passed, and she says that Judah's wife died. Again, this comes the saying of Judah, introducing death in the family. See, and then it says, first was his two sons, now his wife. See, and then he said he went to be comforted by his friend. Now his friend, again, we're talking about intermingling with the ungodly. This is a friend now. This Abdullamite is now his friend. And he says the Hira the Adullamite, he went to be comforted by these ungodly men and ungodly people. Sometimes Christians will go and get comfort in the places that they don't belong. And this is what this man is doing here. And he went down in Timnah. Now verse 13, it says, "And he was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep." Now Tamar was told that his father-in-law is going to Timnah. And again, you see, Judah is still considered her father-in-law, because the relationship is still there as long as she is within the family. Now she's not supposed to go outside the family. She's to wait for her Judah's youngest son Shelah to be grown before she marries him. So, and she's still waiting on the youngest. And it says in verse 14, "And she put her widow's garment." Now she knew that her father-in-law is going to Timnath for the sheep shearers. And then he says she know that, and then he says in verse 14, "And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the open place which is by the way to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife." Now she took off her widow's garment, and then she put on clothes. And here she put on the clothes of not a widower. Now she comes here, not a widow, excuse me. She comes here and covered her face with a veil, and then she sat in an open place. The word open place means like a place where people pass by and people, travelers, come and see. And now she sits there at the streets in the way of Timnah. And here, because she thought that she's not going to get married. She thought that Judah has pulled a fast one on her, that he's saving his son Shelah for somebody else. And because now Shelah is grown, and now she has been a widow for a while now. You can see that she waited on throughout until this youngest son of Judah becomes an adult. And that Judah is trying to not give her for a wife, and because Judah probably was reluctant or may not be interested, seeing that she's older, and now she doesn't want his son to have to have an older woman as a wife, but saving her son. Now here, this woman is going to take matters into her own hands, because now she's taking this matter into her own hands. She's not trusting God. Now she moves here, and then he says, and when Judah saw her, again, saw her in the open place, he thought her to be an harlot, because she covered her face. And that's what the custom of those days is. The harlot or prostitute will sit in an open place and then have her face covered. And he says Judah saw her, again it says the word saw, and thought she be a harlot, because she covered her face. And it says here, moreover, it says, and he turned unto her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me, that thou mayest comest unto me? And again, he asked to sleep with her. He asked to sleep with her, and he did not know that she was, his daughter-in-law. And now she's now bargaining with his father-in-law. It says in verse 17, it says, and he said, I will give thee a kid, meaning a young calf. He says, I will give thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And now she asked for a price. She said, okay. Judah said, I will send you a kid from the flock. And then she said, she now asked for a pledge. She said, what will your pledge be? And here it says in verse 18, and he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, thy signet, thy bracelets, and thy staff that is in thy hand. And he gave it to her, and came in unto her, and she conceived. You see, now he asked, what pledge would I give you? I'll give you this. What is your pledge? And she said, your signet and your staff and your bracelet. You see, she's now trying to get a hold of something that belongs to him. And here, she said, give me everything that you have, as a pledge. And then he came in unto her, and then, Tamar conceived. Now, the Bible recognized a baby right from the conception, right in the beginning. You see, all these abortion movement, the Bible recognizes clearly that, the person, immediately the sperm enters, and then the child is conceived, the egg, everything, that's the beginning of pregnancy. You see, it says, she conceived right there. And then it says in verse 19, and she rose and went away and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. Now she went away, and then she put on the widowhood dress. She put on the widowhood dress and put away her veil. Obviously, she had gotten what she wanted. Then in verse 20, he says, and Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Again, Judah gave Adullamite the kid flock, the calf, because that's what she asked. He thought that, and then he said to give it to the woman, the harlot, but now she's nowhere to be found. She was gone. And then it says in verse 21, then he asked the man of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. Again, he asked the man, and the man says, there's no harlot in here. There's no prostitute here. What are you talking about? And then in verse 22, it says, and he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of that place said that there was no harlot in that place. And Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. See, Abdullamite came back and returned the calf, the young calf, to Judah. And Judah says, okay, let this woman take it to her. What does he mean? What is he talking about? He's mean, let her, in other words, let her keep all the stuff, the pledge I gave her. Let her keep the signet ring. Let her keep the bracelet and the staff, because I don't want to be shamed. This is trying to protect himself, his reputation. See, and that's what sometimes we're trying to cover everything up and then trying to cover our reputation. See, because he doesn't want to be shamed. He said, let the woman keep everything now. And here he says, I don't want to be shamed. And then verse 24 says, and it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar thy daughter-in-law had played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth and let her be burned. You see, this man, 3 months have passed now, and after Judah was told, 3 months has passed now. Judah now is being told that her daughter-in-law had played the harlot, and that she's pregnant with a child, in harlotry. And then Judah said, bring her to be burned. See, this man is a terrible human being. Him himself have not been, right. And now he's now casting judgment on a woman. Now he's casting judgment on her daughter-in-law. And here is the hypocrisy of Judah displayed here. And this woman was going to expose it. She's going to expose his hypocrisy here. Again, he's referring also in this case, according to the Levitical practice. And when somebody, the law of God, the law of Moses, actually, of course, the law of God, but when someone is committing a whoredom, it says that she has to be burned, because here in Leviticus 21 verses 9 it says, and the daughter of any priest if she profane by playing the whore, she profaneth her father. Again, here it speaks about her father, meaning that she has playing a harlot in her father's house. The daughter of a priest playing a harlot in her father. And then the punishment here, the condemnation, is that she is to be burnt by fire. She is to be burnt by fire. And moreover, in Deuteronomy 22 verses 20 to 21, it says, but if this charge is true, that the evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring her unto the doorway of her father's house. Again, speaking about her father's house. And the men of the city shall stone her to death, because she has committed a deliberate sin in Israel by playing the prostitute in her father's house. Again, this is the law back in the future. This is what he's saying in the future, when the law is given to Moses, that whenever this kind of sin is happening in their father's house, a woman plays a harlot in her father's house, she is to be stoned. So Judah here is bringing this case, even when the law is not given, but he's still bringing this case because of his covenant with God. And now it is, if when a woman is playing the harlot in her father's house, the punishment is to be burnt. Again, that's one thing God is, Judah is referring here. It says, bring her that she will be burnt, meaning that she has played the harlot. Again, this woman is still, despite not being directly in living with Judah, but although she's still married to the family, because, or despite the fact of being dead, Onan is dead, and then she's waiting for Shelah, his youngest son, Judah's youngest son, to become an adult so she can marry her, so he can marry him, But Judah is still her father-in-law, you see. And now he's taking in this authority to cast judgment on this woman and says, let her be burnt because she has played a harlot in my house. She has played a harlot. Bring her and let her be done. So he has the authority to cast judgment upon her. But again, he says in verse 25, and then he says, when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, I'm with child. And she said, discern, I pray thee, who are these, the signet, the bracelet, and the staff? It says, she said that the man that I got this pledge from, this man I've got this signet ring, this bracelet, and the staff. This is the man who got me pregnant. Discern, who are these? Who does this belong to? And this is the one who is the father of my child. Again, that's Judah here. See, that's Judah. And he says here in verse 26, and it says that Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son, and he knew her again no more. See, here Judah was not righteous, and he too have sinned. And there are many, fundamental men, like Judah, until, they are exposed of hypocrisy, until they are exposed of their hypocrisy. So many women have been killed, have been prosecuted by religious hypocrisy, especially by religious men, and in many religions. And this man is he's hiding his face in religion, because that's what he's doing. And here, Bible says we are all sinners in the eyes of the Lord, and only by God's mercy we are saved. But here you have this man hiding, and he's hiding in his hypocrisy, and then he get exposed here. He was, humiliated right now, because now he thought that he was righteous to cast judgment upon her because she has committed this whoredom, but him himself has partaked in committing this act. Again, God begins with us in our sin. God begins with sin. See, all of us have come short and fall in the glory of God. And you must come to God as a sinner, and then, not self-righteous. And this man is, Judah's self-righteousness, was exposed. And then here it says in verse 27, it says, and it came to pass in the time of her travail, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez. Again, Pharez, the word Pharez means breach. And Pharez is the father of the Hamulites and the Hezronites. Again, the Hezronites, according to the word of God, the Hezronites also came through the royal line of David. Through that Hezronite, the line of the kingly tribe of David, that leads to Christ, came through that. So Judah is, from Judah you have all the way down from King David, and then from King David all the way down to Christ. Again, here is one of the line of Christ now identified here. Again, he says in verse 30, and afterward came out his brother, that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zara. Now, Zara, the word Zara, according to Strong Concordance and Brown Driver Bridge, means rising. Again, it's the descendant of the Zarahites. And here you see this man, Judah, having twins. You have Pharez and Zara. Again, now Tamar bore these twins, Pharez and Zara. And Pharez, through the line of Pharez came Christ. So we see the genealogy. It says Tamar is in the genealogy of Christ. See, this woman who's not perfect, and there's no virtue for her. There's no virtue in her. But here God is moving all these things despite, all these perversion that came into the line of Christ. And despite all these, despite the sin of Judah here. And you have now in Matthew genealogy, you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then you have Judah. And Judah, you have Pharez, and from Pharez, that is born out of perversion, you see down there to King David. And when you get down to King David, you are going down another 14 generations, you have Christ. So we see here, one of the chapter lesson of today is, this chapter it teaches, teaches a great lesson of, living God's covenant, leaving God's covenant and going into a far country like most Christians today do. And they will leave God's covenant, and it wants to, God wants us to live in the best light. He wants us to live in the best light and in a high plane, according to J. Vernon McGee. But here you see, so the world can see us through that light, see, and not trying to mingle with the world. You see, most Christians trying to mingle with the world, but here, and you have this thing happening because this man is mingling with the world. And also, despite Judah's disobedience, despite his disobedience, God uses the mess he made with Tamar, and then made it good, and then placed them in the genealogy of Christ still, because God's promise is without repentance. God still made good of his promises. And here we see that here, that happened here. So we're going to continue on in Genesis verses chapter 39, and we're going to see about Joseph as he goes down to Egypt, and we're going to follow through the line of Joseph, and we're going to meet you again in Genesis chapter 39. Until then, precious saints, God bless.